This is an overview of the Drupal module Codit Blocks. I built Codit Blocks to support developers, to support the kind of work that I do. It's designed to allow developers to make custom, simple, or complex blocks easily and quickly with no admin. Let's face it, Drupal websites need blocks. Whether you're putting them out in panes or locking them onto a page with context or just using the block admin, they need blocks. It's hard to have a nice Drupal website without them. It can be simple blocks, right? You can have the same block, has the same content on every page. If you're doing that, then any of the block solutions will work, whether it's just the regular block, default block admin, whether it's custom page module, whether it's boxes module, or whether it's Codit Blocks. All of them can do this. Same block on every page. Getting a little bit more complex, you might have a situation where you need different block content on every page, but all from the same block. That starts getting a little bit more complicated. Some of the other solutions start dropping out. Either that or they require you to put PHP into the database. Boo. Right. You might have a little bit more complex situation where you have a big site, so you're worried about caching. You want to make sure that you're not repeating a bunch of heavy lifting processes over and over and over again for every single page generation. So you might want to do them once and then cache them by content within a subsection. So the block, when it appears in this subsection, will all be cached. So the content of these blocks would all be the same. The content of these blocks would all be the same, and the content of these blocks would all be the same. And they would all be cached. So it was built once, and then it would be cached for a certain amount of time. Getting a little bit more complex, we might go to caching the same content by user. So everywhere the user goes on the site, they see the same content that's unique to them and may have been generated through some heavy lifting on the PHP side, and so something that you wouldn't want to repeat on every single page load. And so you would cache that block content just for them. So this person would get all the same content for yellow, the violet person would get all the same content, and the blue person would get all the same content. Some of the other, in fact all of the other block solutions are going to have trouble with this, especially when it comes to caching. Really only Codit Blocks is the only module that's out there right now that can handle it. The only other solution is custom coding your own module to do it. Getting even more complex, you might want to cache something by role, so that all users that are content admins might get a certain block that was generated by heavy lifting, maybe, that you wouldn't want to repeat again. You might cache it so that user always gets the same content and you don't have to keep repeating that heavy lifting. You might have it so that a comment contributor might get a different block, and that those of a certain role might not get any block. And again, the delivery of no block would still be cached, so you don't have to figure that out every single time. Then you could go to something insanely complex, where you have the cached same content by role, permission tag, combination of node, field value, and a user value. If you have enough users, you might have a bunch of repeats in those combinations. And again, where you wouldn't want to do the heavy lifting on the PHP side over and over and over again for the same end result, and you could actually cache it based on all of those values. And again, to my knowledge, there is no other block methodology module that's out there other than Codit Blocks that can handle this kind of thing. Codit Blocks is a module that works within the Codit framework, so it does have a dependency of requiring Codit Local and Codit. these two modules essentially work together to have contrib code that resides in the contrib portion of your site that does not get hacked on a site-by-site basis. And then in combination with a sort of a storage module that actually is designed to be hacked, so it would reside in default modules custom, or more specifically a specific site modules custom. And in this Codit local, there are other presentations that address what else you can do with Codit local and Codit. Codit Blocks just works within it. So in addition to being able to store custom site JS, custom site hooks, and custom PHP functions that you like to use, it can also then plays along with Codit Blocks. And with Codit Blocks, we basically have the base code for Codit Blocks, and then actually where your blocks get defined, and where the custom templates and things like that for those blocks, those actually all store in Codit local. And I can show you that here, right on my site that I have running right now. I've got in sites, modules, contrib, I've got the Codit module. And then in default modules, custom, I've got Codit local. And in Codit local, there's a directory for blocks. And in blocks, there's going to be a block bin where we can actually store blocks. What ends up happening is each block takes on its own directory, and in that directory it has a TPL file and an include file. And those get generated all through Drush, or you can just copy and paste a sample, and I'll walk you through that shortly. So if we go to our terminal to install Codit Blocks, I already have Codit and Codit local installed. They could be installed in a very similar manner, though, if you didn't already have them installed. And if I go Drush, download Codit Blocks, I'm specifying the destination just so you can see it. In most cases, it will probably already go into this location of sites all modules contrib. Again, Codit Blocks is not one, even though you're going to be building your blocks through code. The actual module Codit Blocks you are not going to alter or hack. It's going to sit as a contrib module in its pristine condition. And all of your changes will actually be into Codit local. So I've specified the path here, but you probably don't need to specify it. And now we're just going to enable it. Again, the Codit local and Codit are already enabled. And there's a reminder there that there's absolutely no permissions or configuration that needs to be set. You can start setting up your blocks, and it even gives you a hint as to where Codit local is currently installed to get you started. So now to get started creating blocks, if we go directly to our terminal, I've opened up a window down here just so we can see what the results of what we're doing in the terminal are. I'm in the doc root of my site. I'm going into sites, and these blocks again are all going to be specific to this site, and so I don't want them in anything that's going to be running, say, a multi-site. I want it specifically for the default, or more specifically into an actual site folder. Let's go into default. We'll go into modules, custom, because we're going to modify these. And there's Codit local. And inside Codit local is another directory for blocks. And there's a block bin. That's where you put blocks. There's a sample already there with some README directions. But if we go to our terminal, and let's say I wanted to create a block that was a list of all the cities in a county. If we're doing a travel site, Drush Codit Blocks add county cities. And it tells me that the block delta county cities, right? County cities is the name of the block. It becomes what Drupal calls the block delta, the unique identifier for that block. County cities has met the criteria to be a block and is being built. And then it gives me some status that the files were actually created, and sure enough, here's county cities. And if we go into county cities, we find two files. We find an actual template file, which can, after this point, be moved to your theme if you wanted to, or it can reside here. It actually needs to stay here, but then you can copy it to your theme so that it gets overridden. You don't want to actually delete it out of here and move it. You want to copy it. And then there's also the callback file, which I'll show you in a bit, that allows you to do some custom coding to pass anything you want into this block. So the drush command, Codit Blocks add, and then the block delta creates the file, creates the two files that you need to declare a block. It declares the block. Within Drupal, the block is immediately visible for placement, and I can show you that in a bit. I should point out that there's also a convention that if a block directory starts with an underscore, it's actually a disabled block. And there's a couple of drush commands, which it's not that easy to just add an underscore or remove an underscore, but there's also a drush command, Codit Blocks disable. And it disables it by putting an underscore in front of it, and then removing it from the block cache, so it no longer shows up for Drupal. And then you can do the same thing to enable it. And we see it immediately update that, okay, the underscore has been taken away. And you can declare blocks literally that quickly. Let's take a look at the files now and see what they actually look like. Again, if we go into Codit Local, Blocks, Block Bin, and we go into County Cities, there's a template already set for you. The template's created. It already has the values that may be passed into this template already extracted. The other nice thing about using Codit Blocks is the little bit of magic is that wherever this block appears, the entity will also be available to this block. So if you're on a node, the node entity will be available to this block template. If you are on a taxonomy term, the taxonomy term entity will be available to this template. You don't have to mess around with loading it and trying to figure out how you're going to load the block, load the node, or load the term. It's already going to be loaded and is available as a variable. There's a bit of placeholder text just so that initially when you place this block you'll be able to tell that it's there. These print Codit template tracer functions are actually something where you can pass a query parameter, a custom query parameter to your page request, and it will actually output the file location of your template. I don't know if you've ever spent 10 or 15 or 20 minutes lost trying to track down where a template is kicking in and where it's being used from, but this will actually squeal on the template and tell where it exists exactly. So within less than a minute, you know where the template is and you can find it and begin working on it. So this is a basic template. If we go and look at the callback function, there's inside the callback include, there's a handful of functions that I'll spend more time on later, but there's basically a callback function, and whatever this function returns, it can return an array of multiple items. Whatever it returns gets passed to the block, and then those values are immediately available in the block template. And so this return function is a nice way to do all your heavy lifting, keep all your heavy lifting out of the template, and here in a nice anonymous function. Again, the entity is available in this. You can actually alter the entity because it's being done by reference. So if you wanted to, if you needed to, you could alter the entity in this block, and it would alter it for the rest of your site. So you do have to be a little bit careful with it. And so whatever this callback function returns, whatever heavy lifting you've done, gets passed on to your template. If you want to control accessibility of your block in terms of who has access to it, basically you can do whatever combinations of checks you want. The access function has the user object and the entity passed to it, and so you can do any kind of analysis that you want, and as long as whenever it returns true, then that block is available to the person that's viewing the page. If you return false, it will not be visible to that person. So the default is true. Everybody can see this particular block right now. But you can do any kind of code processing that you want here. You can evaluate somebody's role, you can evaluate permissions, you can evaluate roles and permissions, and a user value. You can go a little crazy in here if you need to. It's rare that I end up needing that, but it's there if you need it. And then you can decide how things are cached within this cache ID function. Whatever value you pass back, whatever value you return is what the block will be cached as. If you return false, then it will not be specially cached. It will only be cached by Drupal's default page caching system. If you return anything else that has to be a unique identifier for that block, it will cache it. And I'll address in a totally separate thing how to really customize that, so you can do some of the different extreme examples that I used at the beginning of this presentation. In your use of any of these callback functions, whether it's the template callback or the access callback or the cache callback, if there's any extra functions custom functions that you want to write to break up some of your heavy lifting that you're doing in here, you can actually add them right to the bottom of this file, and they will only get used for this block. Now to this block where we've just created this Codit block county cities block. If we want to go to place them, this is the only admin work, and it has nothing to do with Codit blocks. It just, in order to place them, you'll need to use one of the placing mechanisms within Drupal. So if we switch to browser here, right, you might be using just the basic block placement method that's the core of Drupal. Well, not really the core, but it's standard with Drupal. And what we find is, sure enough, County Cities is here in the disabled section, and it's ready to be placed in any of the regions and could be configured, although I don't recommend any of the additional configuration, but you can configure it if you want. Truthfully, using the blocks, the block admin to place custom blocks created by Codit, or really anything else, is just kind of lacking. If you're using something a little bit more flexible, a little bit more powerful, like context, even in context, here I've got a site-wide context for my site, and if I go to the blocks as a reaction, sure enough, Codit blocks shows up, and County Cities is there for placement, and I can add that to any of my regions and base it on any condition that I want for its placement. It can also be put in with panels, so that's also a possibility. These are just, there's nothing special about these. They are fully functioning blocks. They just have a back end that's really strong. And I'm going to go ahead and add this block to one of our sections just so we can see it displayed. And I'm going to put it in the content section. Save this site-wide admin, and now if I go to my home or any place else, sure enough, I see this is the output of Codit block County Cities. I mentioned earlier the trouble of trying to find templates sometimes. I know I've lost a lot of time to that, and I've seen other developers lose a lot of time to that, especially if you're coming into the middle of a project or inheriting a project. It can be hard to tell sometimes where a template's coming from, and you got to trace it down and echo stuff out to see if you've got the right template. I find this a little bit nicer. There are those template functions that were in the template TTO and TTC, template tracer open, template tracer closed, and basically there's a permission that goes along with this. So if we switch to permissions, I said there is no admin to Codit Blocks, but there is admin to Codit, and it's just the permissions essentially. One is view template tracer HTML comments. If I make it so that the administrator can see those, and I save those permissions. If I refresh this page and I inspect the element around my block, what I find is there's actually this HTML comment that appears and tells me exactly what TPL this is coming from. And it also marks the beginning of the block and the end of the block, so I have no question as to where it begins and where it ends. Whereas if I open this up in an incognito window, so I'm logged out, and I inspect the same thing, right? Logged out person who's not admin does not have rights to see it, so it doesn't output. It doesn't tell me where the block comes from. And so we've got some security built in there so that people can't, the average user can't see where your code is coming from, but you and your developers can, so it should save them a little time there. Thanks for following along. This introduction to Codit Blocks ended up being a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but thanks for sticking with it, and give it a try.